All right, today we're going to continue with Unit 4, okay, political patterns and processes, talk about political power and territoriality, right? So the organization of space, what that means is what the map looks like, right? And how did it get that way from the historical process and from the current process, right? And then events and ideas, right? So in other words, how did this map get to look like it does, right? So political power is expressed geographically on a map as country or as control over people, control over land and resources, and it's illustrated. It happens through neocolonialism, shatter belts, and choke points. So those three things are kind of examples of the way politics change the way that people live. So territoriality is the connection of people, their culture, and their economic systems to the lands. So the learning objective here is to be able to describe the concepts of political power and territoriality as it's used by geographers. All right, so political power means, okay, the form of government that's practiced by a state, right? So there's really three different forms, right, that you need to be familiar with. Authoritarian, which is authority, right? Like I'm in charge, you're going to listen to what I say or you die, okay, kind of like my classroom. Republics, right, where the voting public has a say, and then a democracy, like a true democracy, is when the people have all the say about what happens directly. All right, authoritarian, okay, the government has a strong central power, so it's a king or a queen. There's no constitution. The people don't have individual freedoms or rights. China, okay, is an authoritarian government. Saudi Arabia is, you may have heard in the news, it was like, I don't know, last year, maybe 2019, that the women in Saudi Arabia finally got the right to drive. They weren't even allowed to drive. Okay, that's an authoritarian government, right? Dictatorships like North Korea, and that is like Kim Jong-un, like he runs the country, and if you don't like what he does, he kills you. Okay, that's an exaggeration, maybe. That's an authoritarian government, right? A dictator. Fascism, Hitler was that way. You guys know all about the Nazis and the Holocaust. And the reason the Holocaust can happen is because of fascism, because the government, somebody has total control. Okay. In a republic, right, the power resides with a body of citizens and not with one person. Okay. Those citizens are entitled to vote. And then they choose elected representatives. Those elected representatives then are responsible for doing the will of the people that elected them. Okay, the United States, that's us. We're a republic, right? Germany. Most countries in the world operate this way, right? It's a little bit different than a democracy, right? A true democracy is a government where the power resides with the majority. So the people would literally make the choices, right? So if it was a democracy and it came down to a rule about the driving age. Well, if we're going to change the driving age, then we vote. And whatever we vote on is exactly how it happens. So if we have a big vote of the people of Illinois, and if we want to change the driving age to 18, well, then it changes to 18, if a majority of the people do it, right? So you're going to get a little separate assignment here on ancient Greece and how their democracy works. It's a little bit different than what we think of when we think of the word democracy. But a republic is what we have, where you choose representatives to make your choices for you. Okay, democratization is when basically the people get more rights. Okay, so when you move from a non-democracy to a democratic system or a more system of a republic like we have. So the U.S. Revolution, the American Revolution against Great Britain, that was democratization of the 13 colonies. We became more democratic and the people got a say in what was going on instead of being ruled by a king. Okay, that happens all over the world. Since we did that in 1776, it's happened in Brazil. It's happened in all over Africa, right? When people fight for their independence, usually what they fight for is to become some form of republic or a democracy so the people have a say. Okay, even when colonialism and imperialism, right, which is another part of this unit, when that ends, okay, that doesn't mean that control over that area is over with. Right? So neocolonialism is indirect control, okay? And it's economic or it's political pressure, right, to control or influence those countries. America does this a lot in Latin America, okay, South America, places like Venezuela, Colombia, okay? We don't have control there. We've never had political control there, but we certainly put pressure on them because we want certain things to happen. Basically, we want their economy to be good enough and we want their government to be stable enough that we can sell things to them. They depend on us. Think about Honduras, okay, and Enrique. They depend on us okay, for economically. Think of all the remittance that got sent back in that book, okay, to Honduras, all the money that got sent back to, whether it was to Enrique or then it was to his kids, right? That's neocolonialism because Honduras is depending on the United States, okay, for money. So it's a new, neo means new, it's a new form of colonialism, okay? All right. Then a shatter belt, you're going to have an activity on this coming up, so I won't spend too much time on it, but think of it as a belt, like a belt you would wear, straight up and down or straight this way. And then you got forces on both sides that are different, that shatter that belt. Okay, so you might have a force that's a republic that's trying to get that area to be a republic, but you also have a force that's an authoritarian government that's trying to get that area to be authoritarian. So they're on the border. Okay, a shatter belt is between two different places. Again, you'll have an activity on that for assignment coming up. Irredentism is a country's excuse for taking over someplace else. Right during World War II, the Nazis said, "Hey, people in Austria, you're not a part of Germany, but you speak German, so you're culturally like us. Therefore, we're going to invade you because you should be a part of our empire because we speak German." Okay, that's irredentism. The Russians took control of a part in southern Russia called the Ukraine. And the Ukraine is a separate country today. But the Russians want to take control of it because economically it's really good. Okay, because it's located on the Black Sea and you can get out the Bosporus and the Dardanelles, which are choke points, which are coming up here in a minute. Okay, and so they like that economic control. The Russians do. It's a warm water port and they can get their stuff out. Okay, so they would use this excuse to say, oh, the people of the Ukraine, they speak Russian. They're just like us. Historically, they've been a part of us before. So therefore, we can take them over. But the people of the Ukraine are like, no, you can't. We don't want you to do that. We like our freedom and we don't want to be a part of your country. Okay, so if the Russians would take all of it over, that would be irredentism. Okay, Ukrainians would not like that. I've had foreign exchange students that are Ukrainians and whew, they are proud to be Ukrainian and not Russian. Okay, a choke point I mentioned a minute ago is a geographical feature. It's sea or land. It's really where land comes together into a narrow part, right? They're usually straits. If you're talking about a geographic term, a strait is a body of water that connects two larger bodies of water. Okay, who controls these choke points is politically important, okay, because it's economically important. Right? If you controlled all the choke points in the world, you could dominate the world and force people to pay you to use the water. That doesn't happen. Okay. So here's a map of the choke points. The biggest one, okay, the most important one is the Strait of Hormuz, which is in the Persian Gulf. So all the oil, that's why it's so important, the oil from the Middle East, from places like Saudi Arabia and Iran and Kuwait, okay, Dubai, United Arab Emirates, you guys have heard of that recently. The oil that comes out of there has to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So if you control the Strait of Hormuz and you can control the world's oil, that's something. Okay, economically, that's a big deal. The Panama Canal is the closest example to us and the one that we're the most familiar with. But if you think of that canal, it's not very wide, okay, but it connects two huge oceans, and that's a necessary place for commerce to go through. So if you control the Panama Canal, that's good for you economically. Politically, it's important. Okay, remember this is political patterns and processes, right? The big one, okay, is the Strait of Malacca, which is located south of Singapore, south of, you guys would think of it as south of China, okay, but south of Vietnam and north of Australia. You can see the 15.2 on that map, okay? That choke point has got an enormous amount of commerce that travels from Asia to India or Asia to the Middle East. Okay, that's the easiest way to ship it, and so that's a really important area. Okay, a really important choke point. So here's some examples of choke points. There's the Strait of Gibraltar. Okay, that's between Europe and Africa. Okay, it connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. The Panama Canal I mentioned earlier, and this map on the left does a great job of showing you that connection. Instead of having to travel all the way around South America, we can go from New York to San Francisco a heck of a lot faster. Okay, so that choke point is important. Okay, the Bosporus and the Dardanelles I mentioned earlier. You guys have probably heard the song Istanbul, like Constantinople, now it's Istanbul, right? So that choke point is important because it gets the stuff from Russia, right, through the Black Sea, then through the Bosporus and the Dardanelles, what's sometimes called the Turkish Straits, out to the Mediterranean, and then out through the Strait out through the strait. There it is. So you see the Black Sea on this map up there where it says North Africa. That's not North Africa. That's Europe. Okay, you get the Black Sea, and then you see where it kind of goes together there between what is Turkey. It says Asia. That's the country of Turkey. That's the Bosphorus, the Dardanelles, then connects you to the Mediterranean, and then will take you out to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so the Strait of Malacca, I mentioned before. Malaysia, okay, this is a really economic, political, strategic strong point of the world. It connects the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea and eventually the Pacific Ocean. So tons of ships go through here. If you've ever seen the movie Captain Phillips, okay, you see the importance of controlling the sea and, you know, how much commerce really travels. Or if you've seen Castaway, when Tom Hanks wakes up and there's a huge ship that's going by, that tells you how much commerce happens. It's out there every day. Okay, there's an enormous amount of commerce that takes place. All right, so the Strait of Hormuz is the world's most important choke point because of that oil. Okay, the Strait of Malacca is the shortest passageway connecting those two places. And then I've got the other straits throughout the world that are super important for people. Okay, all right, territoriality, and this is the end of this, is the connection of people, their culture, and economic systems to the land. So this basically helps them be connected to the territory, okay, to the land. This gives them a desire of ownership over that space. So it's a reason historically maybe why one culture would want to have control over that. Okay, so the Jews after World War II, instead of staying where they survived, some of them survived the Holocaust, they wanted territoriality. They wanted to go back to their ancient homelands called the Zionist movement. Okay, they wanted to go back to what is today Palestine, right, in Israel. And so the country of Israel was formed for those Jews. Okay, so that's territoriality. They wanted a defined space for themselves. Okay, I'm going to stop right there, and that is it.